everybody. Thanks for coming out. My name's Toby. I'm a web developer. I do security stuff and robotic stuff in my spare time. I'm really feeling that last talk, man. That was so real. That stuff about like being an incredible idiot. I remember one time there were three pieces. There was a compiler and a presenter and an editor, and I went to fix this big user story. It took me about 2 weeks, and I was like, you wanted me to fix that in the compiler, right? On the compiler side, that's where it fixes all those problems. They're like, no. No, the editor should do that before it ever sees the compiler. Always have someone who you trust. Okay, so this is about upgrading your security in 10 minutes with me, Toby V. You don't need to write anything down. All the stuff that's here is presented on a handy website after the talk, so no worries about that. But first, let's get a few points of clarification out of the way to begin with. Security is not your job. And by that I mean, saying, hey, it's your job when you go and use a service, when you set up an email account, when you do something, you need to do this to be secure. That's sort of strange, right? Right, when they say, hey, when you buy a safe, be sure to press a red button on the bottom 11 times or the door just pops open to anybody who walks by. It doesn't really make a lot of sense. Security shouldn't be opt-in, right? Security, we're going to talk about setting some options on some accounts and stuff that add security, which again is a strange thing, right? And we had a really good explication of that in one of the earlier talks where we talked about having a nice frictionless path into getting an account. And Twitter is the worst for this because Twitter, every day they look at the number of new users and they're like, we're 20% below where we need to be, and we were 20% below where we need to be for the last 2.5 years, so we're really doing bad. So anything that says, hey, you need to set up the security thing, no, it's going to be a tough sell, right? So oddly, that Twitter, like many places, have a sort of opt-in security. And then the last one, and this is the most important one, poor security doesn't justify crime. I'm going to try to not talk about my beefs with sort of the security community too much in this talk, but this is a pretty good one. And I think at a fundamental level, we all know this, right? We know that somebody who works at a retirement community who's stealing from old people and burning them with cigarettes because they can get away with it, that it's not like, oh, well, those people should have been more careful. They shouldn't have gotten old. We know that at some level, but yet, there was a guy, a really well-followed security expert who, do you remember a couple of weeks ago when the internet just didn't work all day? And the cause of that was these Internet of Things objects that had all been hacked and owned to be able to send packets. Really well-respected guy said, they should have, the people, cool, so we know what caused this. It was lazy users who didn't reset their passwords correctly on their devices. And the devices he's talking about are like this fridge that tells you the weather. You plug it in, it starts telling you the weather. I think maybe you dial in your zip code. Yeah, of course, it occurs to me to like go in and reset the password on that every 6 months. I mean, who wouldn't, right? It would just be part of your standard practice. By the way, this device, like most of them, it was completely impossible to reset your password. But even beyond that, right? It's not, to build a device that's very easy to hack into and break, right? I may say, hey, you should do this for your security, but that doesn't mean it's your fault when someone breaks into it. And a big problem in the security community for sure is to say, well, it's easy to steal this money, steal this information, therefore it's kind of okay, right? Nope, sorry. Anyway, so let's talk about making ourselves a little more secure. So where do we start? So normally when we're talking about security of any kind, but certainly personal electronic security. And by the way, I should have said this earlier, this is not about securing your apps or your stuff that you build as a developer. This is all about personal security. So yeah, if that's wasn't what you wanted, there's donuts at the back, and there's still some LaCroix. So normally, to do security of any kind, we have to start with what we call a threat model. So what's a threat model? Here's a threat model. So a threat model starts with a risk that we have. We say, hey, there's this risk out there. And to build a threat model, normally, we have to estimate 4 things. And to anybody who's into statistics and Bayes' theorem, these might seem a little familiar. But basically, they go like this. They say, how likely is this attack to happen? What's the cost if that attack is successful? How much will the risk be reduced if we do some countermeasure? And what does the countermeasure cost? And an example of that might be, hey, what's the danger that someone's going to break into my house? I say, okay, I can look at Portland maps and I can make an estimate. And all these numbers are always just estimates. But in this case, we say, okay, I make an estimate. There's maybe about a 2% chance every year that someone's going to break into my house. What's the cost of a successful attack? I can go ahead and look at the cost of the things in my home and what will be missing. And other stuff, like how upset I'll be if somebody breaks into my house, et cetera, et cetera. And then I look at, hey, what will some sort of countermeasure to that? How much will that reduce the risk? So what if I lock all my doors? Well, I know that most home invasions happen without having to breach a door, by breaching a window or something else, so not that much. And then this is always important to threat modeling, what's the cost of a countermeasure? So my friend calls me up. They said, hey, you said I could stay here. I say, oh yeah, sorry, I'm stuck at work. Shit, I locked the door. You're gonna have to stand on the front porch for 2.5 hours, and that happens a few times a year. So notably, this is why I don't lock the doors in my house, because threat modeling can get you to a place where you say, hey, there's a cost to that. We won't be doing that in 10 minutes, for obvious reasons, but because we don't have enough time. But also, all the countermeasures that I'm going to present here, these top 5 countermeasures, are all very cheap. And threat modeling is really critical because a lot of the things that people will tell you to do have either dollar costs or hassle costs associated with them. So you really want to take a minute to think about, do we need to take this measure? So you'll see really common recommendations like using a virtual private network, or having a second phone, or having virtual machines or other stuff. And those all have pretty significant costs. Let's get to what those top 5 actually are. And I just want to mention that all these steps will be up on tobyfee.com, or they are right now. So you don't need to write any of this down if you are not so inclined. So here they are. Here are the top 5 that, in my time working with people in their personal security, going over what risks they most commonly face and how to counter them, these are the things that I tell basically everybody to do. So the first one is adding 2-factor authentication to your email. So email security probably, for some of us, may not even feel like that much, because it's not like we get, it's not like you get your grandmother's dying words via email. Well, maybe your grandmother's dying words. Your brother's dying words via email, right? It's probably going to be a Facebook message or a tweet or something. So, it's sort of like, well, email, I kind of go into it. But when we start to do the math a little bit, email usually comes to be the most critical thing that we have to protect, because when someone's breaking into one of our other accounts, when someone's violating our other accounts, taking money out of our bank account and stuff, how are we going to find out about that usually, right? It's usually going to be an email. So when someone has access to our email, is able to go in there, delete things, move things around, then generally our ability to protect ourselves from other stuff starts to drop almost to 0. So in general, yeah, this is sort of the first thing we should do. And I used to say, hey, switch over to Gmail and use 2-factor. A bunch of the other big services are now also offering some version of 2-factor authentication. I have these images up so that when you go to do these steps, hopefully this will kind of trigger hey, I must be in kind of the right place because I'm looking at this stuff. So 2-factor authentication for email is a big one. Next one, do some effective ad blocking. So effective ad blocking is not just about your peace of mind or your ability to actually read an article for once. It's the primary vector for malware and spyware for most people's experience is advertising content. When you think about it, most people who are running content sites do not know what advertising is on their site minute to minute. So the ability to push up content there that's malicious is pretty common. To the people who said, hey, I have a security question this evening, almost certainly the way that they got their phone or computer infected was through advertising on the site. So uBlock Origin is a great tool for that. Again, be up on tobyfee.com after this. Link to get it. Actually, it's not just for Chrome, they have it for a bunch of other stuff, so awesome. Step number 3, I call out a Windows-specific step because generally your other systems are so unlikely to get hacked and owned in some way that securing Windows is pretty critical even if you're carrying around a Mac laptop. Do you have a Windows machine somewhere in your house? Do you have a refrigerator or something that's running Windows? That's just life. That's just life now, is that we have a refrigerator running Windows. Lasers in the jungle, I don't know. Okay, so Decent Security is a great guide for that. The super short version of that is get a more recent version of Windows, turn on its automatic updates, and generally Microsoft's own countermeasures are very effective. So that is the opposite of some other recommendations that you will see. In fact, when I went to look for an image for like turning on automatic updates, there were 90% more results for how to turn off automatic updates than how to leave them on. So that's not good. Yeah, so if you've been kind of sticking around with Windows XP and stuff, generally, I said I wasn't going to tell this joke, but I'm going to tell this joke. Men and a woman are walking through the woods, and they come upon a bear rampant. That is, it's standing up on its hind legs, opening its jaws, furious. And the woman sits down on the ground, and she starts tying her shoes. The man's, well, why? What are you doing? We got to get away from this bear. She stands up, her shoes tightly tied, and she says, I don't really need to outrun the bear. I just need to outrun you. So when you have Windows XP, you're the guy with the untied shoes. So, when you have unupdated Windows 7, right, when someone goes out to hack computers, to own thousands of computers at a time, the first thing they're going to do is find Internet of Things devices that have hard-coded passwords, and then after that, they're going to infect Windows computers. I think there was a story this week about a hospital that had a bunch of its hard drives encrypted and was told you have to pay us this many bitcoins to get your computers back. And those people, those Eastern European hackers who were doing that, they weren't trying to kill people in hospitals. They just infect whatever Windows machines they can find. So anyway, automatic updates. Windows Defender is great, especially Windows 8 and later. Windows Defender is very effective. And tools that disable that and disable random parts of your registry because some random freeware author is smarter than Microsoft, not so cool. So Decent Security has a great guide on that. Again, that's linked from tobyfee.com. Signal is a great phone app that allows you to communicate much more privately with people. So Signal is works off of your phone number as your identifier. The person you're talking to also has to install Signal on their phone, but it's a single install. There's not some crazy, key passing process when you go to use it. Signal's a very easy way to make sure that your communications are much more secure. And the reason I mentioned Signal as opposed to a bunch of other gobbledygook with Facebook and Twitter and other HTTPS settings is however secure you are with some other tool like Facebook Messenger, the other party of that conversation gets to be as secure as they're going to be, right? And that might not be very secure at all. Signal helps ensure that you are both have a similar level of security. It also does really cool stuff, like it warns you if the person that you're talking to has the same phone number that they had before, but is using a different device all of a sudden. So you can kind of check in and say like, hey, when's my birthday? Something, and check in a little bit. But it's very easy and trouble-free. It just looks like another, looks like WhatsApp or whatever else on your phone. And so these are actually called out as two separate steps, even though they're the same. One is the first one is the fifth one. Two-factoring your other accounts. So that's your Facebook, your Twitter, your LinkedIn, any other accounts that you use frequently or have information that you're worried about somebody being able to log into the account without your knowledge. And that's the way to think of two-factor authentication, is that it is very effective at preventing somebody getting into your account totally without your knowledge. You might, there's still sort of remote ways that someone could get in and get a bunch of information. You get a bunch of emails like, oh, what's going on? But yeah, so the way to do that is to just Google Twitter two-factor login, and you'll find the instructions for how to do that, or whatever social networks that are sort of critical to you. I would say two-factor is pretty easy. Of all these steps, it's the one that has some hassle associated with it, but it's usually pretty tiny. You log in from another computer, you got to get a text message with a code, and then you log in. You're done. Never have to do that again on that computer, or not frequently. So it's pretty low cost, but if you don't use the site at all, it doesn't have very critical information, you can skip it. But do think about it for stuff where you have a lot of information you're worried about being private. So those steps again: secure your email, do some effective ad blocking, update Windows, think about Signal for, I should have written securer, like, I don't want to say nothing's perfect, nothing's secure, but we do our best. We improve ourselves. We try to be a little bit faster than the other guy running away from the bear. And then two-factor login for a few things. After that, what's to think about next? The EFF has fantastic guides on security, and one of the things I really love about those guides is that they're not, hey, everyone should do all these 7 things. They're, hey, what are you doing? Are you a journalist? Are you a student? Are you politically active? Here are some of the things that you might think about doing, so that you can kind of think about what you're protecting yourself against, rather than just kind of doing all the things. Yeah, I have a thing up on my Twitter and on my site if you want to consult and talk for 45 minutes generally about that threat modeling stuff. And I'll write out like, hey, okay, now here's what you need to do to actually put that stuff in place. And again, if you want to see those steps again, links to all those sites, links to the EFF guides and to decent security, that's all up at tobyfee.com.